Welcome back to the show-off gear. A little after 5:30, Mrs. Carmody happened to look out the kitchen window and saw Philip coming up the driveway followed by a crowd of children. On his head he was carrying his shoe. Balanced on the toe of the shoe was a small jar. Sitting on the jar was a little green frog. When Philip saw his mother's face at the window, he called out, "Hey, Mom, look! Watch me, I'm going to jump over the wheelbarrow with all this stuff on my head." "Philip, don't," his mother called. But he couldn't hear her, and she watched horrified as he made a run for the wheelbarrow, caught his foot in the garden hose, fell backwards onto the rhododendron bush. The small jar from Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle flew up into the air and landed on the concrete with a crash. Mrs. Carmody dashed out, knelt down, and began picking up little pieces of broken glass out of the spilled white powder. Having extricated himself from the rhododendron bush, Philip said, "Gee, Mom, I'm sorry I busted it. I didn't mean to." "Don't talk," said his mother briskly. "Go in and get me a clean white envelope out of my desk, especially off the stove. Hurry." While Philip was gone, Mrs. Carmody carefully pushed the white powder into a little mound and held her hand over it to keep the wind from blowing it away. When Philip brought her the envelope and the specialist, she scooped up all the powder into the envelope, all but about a half of a teaspoonful. This she carefully lifted into the palm of her hand and blew at Philip. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" he said, rubbing his eyes and coughing. "Something very wise, I'm sure," said his mother. Just then, Mr. Carmody's car turned out into the driveway. Immediately, Philip jumped into the wheelbarrow and yelled, "Watch me, Dad. I'm going to stand on my head in the wheelbarrow. I'm going to stand on my head and say the alphabet backwards." Mrs. Carmody looked at the wheelbarrow, but it was suddenly empty. There was no one there. Not only that, but there was no sound either. Mr. Carmody got out of the car and said, "Where's Philip? Wasn't he just here a moment ago?" "Yes, he was," said Mrs. Carmody, smiling a secret smile. "Well, I want him to go put the hose in that wheelbarrow in the garage," said Mr. Carmody. "I'll tell him," said Mrs. Carmody. "He should be back in a minute or two." She and Mr. Carmody went into the house and closed the kitchen door. Philip, quite red in the face from standing on his head in the wheelbarrow, and hoarse from reciting the alphabet backwards and forwards, called after them, "Hey, Mom and Dad, look at me." But they didn't even glance. They acted as if they didn't hear him. "Hey, you kids, look at me," he called to the children who had followed him home from Mrs. Piggle-Wiggle's, but nobody answered. They just turned and walked out of the yard. Slowly he righted himself and climbed into the wheelbarrow and went into the kitchen. "How come you and Dad didn't watch my trick?" he asked his mother, who was busy at the stove. "She said we didn't see you doing any tricks. Now go put away the hose in the wheelbarrow and sweep up that broken glass. Dinner will be ready in about 5 minutes, and it's your favorite." "You mean frankenfurters and baked beans and brown bread?" Philip asked. "That's right," said his mother. "Hot diggity," said Philip. Reaching into the broom closet, his mother took out the broom and dustpan and handed them to him. "Here," she said, very relieved that he was visible again. "Sweep up that glass first." Philip took out the broom, held it over his shoulders, and began making loud zooming noises. "Hey, Mom," he yelled, "watch me. I'm a jet plane. Here I go. Take off." As he yelled, "Watch me," he began to disappear, and with takeoff he was gone. Humming contentedly, his mother took the lid off the steamer and poked the brown bread. At dinner, he disappeared 3 times. The first time was when he turned his chair around, crouched down on the seat, and said, "Look at me. I'm a big gorilla in a cage. Toss me a banana, somebody." He disappeared just after tossing me. Mr. Carmody almost jumped out of his chair. Meg, he yelled at Mrs. Carmody, "The boy's gone. There must be a trap door under the chair." "Don't get hysterical, Jordan," said Mrs. Carmody. "He'll be back." And he was, in about 2 minutes. The next morning, after he was dressed, Philip climbed on the banister and yelled at Connie, "Hey, Connie, look at I'm slide down the banister frontwards, sitting up." Then he disappeared, and didn't come back into focus until everyone had finished breakfast, and his poached eggs were quite cold. His mother noticed he had a large purple bump over his left eye. As he slid into his chair, and Philip said, "Nobody in this whole darn family cares what happens to me. My whole skull is probably cracked, but a lot you care." "Quiet," roared Mr. Carmody. Mrs. Carmody said, "Eat your eggs, dear. It's getting late." As she spoke to him, she leaned over and sprinkled some of the show-off powder in his hair. Turning around and giving her a suspicious look, Philip said, "What you doing to my hair, Mom?" "Just smoothing it down," said his mother, smiling dreamily. During geography, while Miss Periwinkle was standing with her back to the class, drawing a map on the blackboard, Philip stood up on his seat, wiggled his ears, looked cross-eyed, looked like an ape, and scratched himself. All surefire tricks for making his classmates giggle. Nobody laughed at all. In fact, nobody even looked at him because he wasn't there. During recess, he put a whole package of bubble gum in his mouth and blew a bubble bigger than his head. But even though the children were all right around him, nobody pointed or laughed or said anything, because of course they couldn't see him. Then the bubble burst and got Philip's hair and face all gummy, and then the children laughed because he was back in focus again. But Philip didn't think it was funny at all, especially when the school nurse rubbed his face and neck and head with benzene, which burned. After school, he didn't feel very funny. His head hurt, and so did his elbow. He rode his bike home, sitting in his seat the ordinary way. Bob Westover and Billy Markle rode beside him, and they talked quite solemnly about baseball. Except once when Billy rode fast down Mission Hill with no hands yelling, "Help, help, I'm out of control. My engine cocked out. My landing gear stuck. Call the crash crew." Bob and Philip laughed like anything until Mrs. Allen backed out of her garage and almost hit Billy, who couldn't stop, and ran into a tree. Mrs. Allen turned white and shook and was very mad and said, "Billy Markle, I'm going to call your mother up and tell her what a little show-off you are. You almost got killed and you almost wrecked my car, and you have practically given me a nervous breakdown." Billy, who was crying, said, "Look at me. My shirt's torn and my nose is bleeding and my bite's wrecked." Mrs. Allen said, "Go on to the kitchen, I'll fix you up, but don't bleed all over my clean lawn." Bobby and Philip called goodbye to Billy, but he didn't hear them. As they rode down the hill around the corner from Philip's house, Philip said, "Poor dumb Billy. What a show-off." And that's the show-off gear. I hope you've enjoyed listening. Join me again next time. Goodbye.